or maybe just outside in the corridors, you can hear my voice and you would like to join this talk, please scuttle in because we have more amazing content lined up. Hopefully you enjoyed your break, you got rehydrated, maybe you saw a few sponsors, but we continue with the day because now we are going to switch and do a deep dive into Angular 18. And to take us on that guide, we have a web development team leader who's from Plexav, who also maintains the open source Greek translations as well, is also a Google developer expert, and something that I found we have in common, a massive Assassin's Creed fan. Any other Assassin's Creed fans in the room? A few others? Yes, amazing games. Can we give a warm round of applause for our next speaker, Aristides? Give him a round of applause.
Thank you. So, hello all, my name is Aristides, and today together we're gonna do a deep dive in the newest release of Angular framework, Angular 18. So some things about me, some basic information. I live in Greece in an island called Evia, and I work as a web development team lead at a company called Plexearth, where we develop web applications using Angular in the front end and Nest.js in the back end. Since 2020, I'm part of the Google Developers Experts program for the Angular framework, and I'm also the author of Learning Angular and Angular Projects books. Learning Angular is a book that is destined for beginners of the Angular framework that want to learn the basics and get started with Angular development. On the contrary, Angular Projects is a book which is a better fit for developers that already have some basic knowledge in Angular and want to dive deeper. For example, each chapter of the book is a different project with Angular. For example, we have Angular with NX, Angular with Ionic, Angular with Electron, and so on. The new edition of my Learning Angular book, the 5th edition, is now available to pre-order from the Amazon website. It is fully updated for Angular 18, and you can find it by scanning the QR code or visiting the link on the bottom. If you want to connect with me via social media, you can find all my profile links at my Google developer profile at g.dev/Aristides. So let's get started. Let's see what is the agenda of today's talk. Today we are going to see some new features and updates in the following Angular areas. We're going to see what's new in tooling with the Angular CLI and developer experience with different packages. What are some stable APIs that have graduated from developer preview in Angular? What's new? Some new APIs and methods in the Angular router library. What improvements we have in the content projection mechanism of Angular. Some new APIs and methods in the Angular Forms library. Improvements in the hydration part of the Angular framework when related with internationalization applications. And finally, major improvements and performance optimizations in the change detection mechanism, which is a very important mechanism in the Angular framework. So let's get started with tooling and developer experience. We will see some updates and new features in the Angular CLI and in the package dependencies of the framework itself. As with any major version in the Angular framework, we have new versions that are related with core packages and tools. Angular 18 is compatible with TypeScript 5.4 and Node version 22. In the Angular CLI 18, we have also a new command, which is called ngdev. ngdev is an alias for the ngserve command that we use for development purposes in Angular. So if you open your terminal and run ngdev, it will execute the ngserve under the hood. The Angular team decided to create this alias, this command, so that to be aligned with other frameworks that have a similar command for development purposes. In Angular 18, we have also a new build system, which is located under the Angular/build npm package. This new system contains a small collection of the existing Angular CLI builders, which are already which can be found currently in the Angular dev kit npm package. And the main difference of this new build system with the existing one is that it does not require any webpack. So this build system works with esbuild and vite build pipeline under the hood. So since we don't use any webpack, we don't have any webpack plugins. And thus we have 30% less package dependencies downloaded in our Angular application, 30% less disk usage because we don't download webpack plugins. And finally, from a supply chain perspective, it is more secure because since we don't use any webpack plugins, less people have access to our code. And when we say people, we mean maintainers of the webpack plugins. Another improvement in the Angular CLI 18 is the assets directory. The assets directory traditionally was used to save static files like translations, icons, images, and fonts. So this assets directory has now been renamed to public. So if you have any third-party tool or bash script that uses the old naming, the assets directory, after upgrading to Angular 18, you should update your script also to align with the new name. In Angular 18, we have also a new collection of stable APIs. And when we say stable, it's those APIs that have graduated from developer preview. And these are some major APIs. For example, we have the control flow syntax, which replaces the old ngIf, ngFor, and ngSwitch directives, and uses a new syntax which is more aligned to the JavaScript syntax for the for loop and the if-else statements. We have also defer abuse API, which gives us the defer block and improves the performance of our application related with Core Web Vitals. And finally, the Angular material is now based on the Material 3 design guidelines. Let's switch now to the Angular router library. Let's see some updates that are concerned with guards and resolvers. The code sample that you are going to see now, it is written with guards in mind, but the same technique can also be applied with resolvers. In this snippet, we see a very basic Angular guard. It is an authentication guard, which is of type canActivateFN. Inside the guard, we inject two services, an authentication service that we have built ourselves and the router service. Our guard checks the isLoggedIn property of the authentication service, and if it returns true, the guard returns also true, so that the navigation to the selected routing path can continue correctly. Otherwise, we use the navigate method of the router service. And this navigate method actually tells Angular to perform a redirect to the specified route path, which in this case is the root path of our application. Alternatively, we could use the parseURL method of the router service. The parseURL method creates a URL tree object. And when a guard returns a URL tree object, it actually tells Angular to perform a redirection to the specified route path, which in this case is, again, the root path of our application. One drawback with this approach is that when performing the navigation with the parse URL method, we cannot use the navigation extras object. And the navigation extras object is part of the Angular router library. It is an options object that allows us to alter the strategy that is followed during the navigation. For example, we can set query parameters while we navigate. We can set properties like skip location change and replace URL. In Angular 18, we have a new API, which is called redirect command, that will allow us to use navigation extras when performing navigation in resolvers and guards. And this redirect command is available from the Angular router npm package. So let's see how we can use the redirect command in the previous code sample. We still call the parse URL method, but instead of returning its result through the guard, we're actually keeping it in a local variable. So the guard in this case returns a new instance of a redirect command object, and in the constructor of the redirect command we pass two parameters. The first one is the URL tree that we have created previously, and the second one is the navigation extras object that we wanted to use from the beginning. Now, another improvement in the Angular router library is in the part of the route configuration of our application. Suppose that we have an Angular application that uses this routing configuration. We have two route definition objects. The first one points to the products path and activates the product list component. Okay. The second one points to the empty string path, which in Angular it's the default path of the routing configuration. And it doesn't activate any component like the first one. Instead, it uses the redirect to property to redirect to the products path. Before Angular 18, we knew that the redirect to property accepts a string. But starting with Angular 18 and beyond, the redirect to property can also accept a function, which is of type redirect function. The redirect function is an ordinary arrow function that gives us access to the full activated route snapshot object, which is active during navigation at that time. So, alternatively, our redirect to property could be an arrow function, and we could write our custom logic inside the arrow function. The route object that you see in this code is the activated route snapshot object that we were talking previously. So inside the arrow function, we can do whatever logic we want, but at the end, we need to return the routing path that we want to redirect to, which in this case is a products path. Now, let's see some improvements in the content projection mechanism of the Angular framework. And specifically, we will see how we can add default content while we project content inside components. Let's say that we have an application with two components. The product card component actually contains an ng content selector, which is used to project content inside Angular. And the app component, which is the main component of our application, and uses the selector of the product card component. But it doesn't project any content inside the HTML tags. It's empty. So if we run this application, we will see that the output of the application will be an empty blank screen. In Angular 18, to avoid this behavior of the blank screen, we can add some default content inside the ng content selector so that the Angular can fall back to this content. In this case, we have added just a simple text, no product. And this text is displayed when the app component doesn't pass any projected content at all. Inside the ng content selector, we can add any HTML valid code. So this feature can become more obvious about its if it is useful or not, if we think in terms of selector slots in content projection. For example, our product component could have 3 NG content selectors, one for the header, the main one as we had before, and the footer. In this case, we could add default fallback content for the header and the footer, as in this case we have product title and product footer, so that to give a better user experience to our users. So let's switch to the Angular Forms library. In Angular Forms, we have a new mechanism which is called Unified Control State Change Events. Before Angular 18, if we wanted to get notified about changes in the status or in the value of a form group or a form control, we need to subscribe to 2 separate observables, the status changes and the value changes, and do whatever logic we want. In Angular 18, these observables have been combined to a single observable, which is called events. So we can subscribe to this events observable, and the EVT object that we get can be of any type, status change event or value change event. So we can have the same experience as before, but with one observable. The Unified Control State Change Events does not support only these 2 events. We have also the pristine change event, which is concerned with the pristine status of a form control or a form group, the touch change event, which is concerned with the touch status, and we have also new events that are related with forms. One for the form submission, with the form submitted event, and another one with the form reset event, which is when the form is reset. So now in the hydration part, if you develop Angular applications that are and with internationalization in mind, then we have some good news for you. Because in Angular 18, you can add hydration support to your internationalization blocks when you are using the Angular SSR feature. And how you can do this? You import the with ITN support method from the platform browser package, and then you add it as a parameter in the provide client hydration method inside your application configuration. Please be aware that this is currently in developer preview. So if you develop internationalization applications, go try it and let us know what you think. So now let's switch to the most hot topic these days in Angular, which is the change detection. We will first see some updates that are concerned with the Angular change detection mechanism. So let's have a look at this snippet. This snippet is part of a component that displays product details in Angular. And we use the new control flow syntax, and particularly the if block, to display the title of the product, the price, which we pipe it over the currency pipe to display it as with currency. And we have also a button that is used to add the product to a shopping cart. And in this HTML button element, we have added a binding to the click event where we call the add to cart method of the component. Additional to that, we have also added the same click event binding in the div element, which is the parent of the button. So if we click the button element, can you guess what's going to happen? Sorry?
The event will fire
twice. That's correct. And why it will fire twice, the add to cart method? Because the event bubbles up. And for some cases, this can be bad because it may affect the performance of our application. And why is that? Because the change detection mechanism in Angular will also be triggered twice for the same method at the same time. So if you don't want this behavior, you can use a new method which is called provide zone change detection from the Angular core npm package. And in this method, you can set the event coalescing property to true. So if you add it to the providers array of your application configuration, you will not have this behavior of bubble up. For new Angular CLI 18 applications, you get this for free automatically. But if you want to update to Angular 18 and have this behavior, you need to add it manually by yourselves. If you want to go back to the previous behavior, you can set the event coalescing property to false. And now let's discuss a bit about zoneless applications in Angular. Angular traditionally uses a library which is called Zone.js to trigger change detection inside the framework. So this Zone.js actually monkey patches some browser events so that it knows where to run change detection. The usage of Zone.js library has some disadvantages. For example, it downloads 30 kilobytes of JavaScript code in the client. The monkey patching that it does in the browser events can trigger change detection more often than needed, so it may impact the performance of your application. And it's also hard to debug. I guess some of you may remember in Angular 16 some error messages in your browser console where you couldn't really tell from which part of your code the error was coming from because it had also the Zone.js error messages. Thankfully, the Angular team has changed that in the latest versions and has improved it. But by default, Zone.js is very hard to debug. So in Angular 18, we have a new method which is called provide experimental zoneless change detection, and we can add it to the provider's array of our application configuration. By adding it there, our application, Angular, will not include Zone.js in our application. Be aware, though, that this is in experimental mode in Angular 18. More updates will come near the end of the year. And what is zoneless applications, right? Let's see a brief overview. Zoneless applications trigger change detection without Zone.js because there is no JS, right? So they use well-known Angular APIs that have been tested and are safe to use and are more controllable, like Mark4Check from the change detector ref service or the Signals API. It can also be used in our unit tests with the testbed class so that we can match the testing environment more closely to the production environment. It also does not require to use the Signals API. Initially, the Angular team started designing the Signals API, and they had in mind to help them go to zoneless. But in the meantime, they showed that it can also be achieved without signals. So signals are not required for zoneless applications, but are recommended. And last but not least, in zoneless support, we have also support for native async await, because previously, async await could not be monkey patchable by the Zone.js library. So to recap, what are some key takeaways from this talk? Angular 18 brings improved ergonomics with Angular CLI and the new package dependencies. We see huge performance optimizations with the new stable APIs, the change detection mechanism, and zoneless applications. It also brings us simpler APIs, as we saw with the Angular Forms library and the Angular Router library. And last but not least, I would totally recommend to go and NG update your Angular applications to Angular 18. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Let's give it up for him one more time. All right. We just have time for questions right now, but if you do have some questions about Angular, definitely